Masechet Zevaḥim, Daf Kaf Gimel. We are in the middle of discussing the chidush of Ziknei Darom. They are talking about a kohen who's either tameh lasheretz or tameh lamet. Now, the general rule is something that we learned from the laws of Pesach Sheni. If an individual is tameh lamet, then he cannot bring a korban. It's pushed off to Pesach Sheni. But since the Torah only says an individual, that means if the community is tameh lamet, the majority of the people, then they all can bring their korban Pesach even though they are tameh. All right, that's what the Torah says. Now, Ziknei Darom add to that, and they say, since Tumat Met is okay regarding a community, and that includes not only Korban Pesach, but a communal offering, so too, it's okay even in an individual offering, B'di Avad. And that works both ways, whether the person who's bringing it is Tameh Lamet, or if the kohen who serves it is tameh lamet. So therefore, a kohen who is tameh lamet and offers a korban b'di'avad, that's okay. And so therefore, that's not included in the tameh pasul in the Mishnah. That is chidush number one. A second chidush that they say is regarding tameh lasheretz. If a kohen is tameh sheretz, then it's pasul, no good at all. However, if an owner is tameh tumat sheretz and he wants to bring his korban pesach, that's okay, because he's not going to handle it himself. He has a korban, he has an animal, he sends someone, the kohen who's tahor slaughters it during the day of the 14th of Nisan. He goes to the mikveh that day, the owner, and then he's tahor by nighttime when he has to eat it. Now, although the korban has to be slaughtered for someone who can eat it, and technically in the afternoon, at that point he can't eat it, but at night he will be able to eat it. And therefore, someone who's tameh lasheretz can send a korban. And that's where we pick up. Amar Ula, tekat lehu resh lakish ledarom ha'eh. Ula said that Resh Lakish shouted at the elders of the south, meaning he argued vehemently against their position. And he said, V'chieze koach merubeh, koach mechaperin, or koach mitkaperin, have omer koach mitkaperin. He said, who has the greater power to overcome impurity when it comes to korbanot? Is it the mechaperin, the kohanim who are doing the atonement, or mitkaperin, the owners who are bringing it and receiving atonement? Well, let's compare them. When it comes to tumat sheretz, the owners who are receiving atonement, they can send a korban even though they are tameh lasheretz. So you see, they have greater power to overcome tum'ah than the kohen. The kohen who's tameh lasheretz, he would make it pasul. With that in mind, we can argue the following kal vachomer that will contradict the elders of Darom. And the elders of Darom agree with this principle, but based on that foundation, look at this kal vachomer. Uma b'makom shenitmeu be'alim b'sheretz meshalechin korbenotehem kohen shenitma b'sheretz eno meraseh. When it comes to the impurity of a sheretz, a place where the owners who are tameh lasheretz, they can send their korban, yet a kohen who is tameh lasheretz, if he serves it, it's pasul. Makom shenitmu be'alim bemet shen meshalechin korbenotehem. If so, in a case where the owners cannot send a korban, if they are tameh lamet, so the owner is even worse, kohen shenitma bemet enodin she'eno meraseh, then all the more so, the kohen should be worse off. And if a kohen who is tameh lamet offers a sacrifice, it should be pasul. And yet, you elders, you said that a kohen who's tameh lamet, he should not be involved, but b'di'avad, it's okay. But his power to overcome tum'ah should be lower than that of the owner. And the owner who sends when he's tameh, not allowed. So all the more so, a kohen should make it pasul. Kasabre ziknei darom tameh met nameh mishalech korbenotav. Oh, chidush, you know what? The elders of the south say that even the owner who's tameh lamet can send his korban pesach. It's okay, he can send the Korban Pesach. We ask, wait a second, how could you say that? Doesn't the pasuk say that if any individual is tameh lamet, they cannot send a korban Pesach in Nisan? They have to wait till Pesach Sheni. So that means they cannot send it. The answer to that is lemitzvah. That pasuk was talking about lechetechila. The word mitzvah here means lechetechila. They should wait till Pesach Sheni. But b'di'avad, let's say they did send the korban Pesach on the regular Pesach in Nisan. B'di'avad, it's a kosher sacrifice. V'aketib ish lefi ochlo. Wait, but the pasuk continues and says, each person, not the pasuk in Shemot, Perek Yod Bet, Chodesh Zevaḥim, Chodesh Rosh Chodashim. It gives the basic laws of Korban Pesach, not Pesach Sheni context, and it says you should slaughter it, each person according to what he eats. And that means that the person who's bringing it has to be able to eat from it. And if the person is tameh lamet, he will not be able to eat from it. So what are you going to do with that pasuk? And again, we answer, lemitzvah, lechatechila. You should not slaughter a korban for someone who can't eat it. But b'di'avad, if he was tameh lamet and brought his korban pesach in Nisan, even though he can't eat it, b'di'avad, the korban is still a kosher korban. Uli kubala. Wait a second. It's not indispensable, meaning it doesn't become pasul. V'hatanya b'michsat nefashot. But the pasuk over there also says, according to the number of the souls. And that teaches that the Korban Pesach can only be slaughtered for people that register in advance. You need a whole group. One person can't eat a whole lamb. You have a whole group of people, 10, 20 people. They sign up and they register. They're all covered by this lamb. And then you could do shechita for all those people. And it covers their obligation. Shechato shelo limnuyav yachol yeheh ke'obed al hamisvah. Now what if he did shechita for someone, having them in mind, who did not register for it? Can it be that it's just lechatechila, not good, but b'di'avad it's okay? No. Talmud omar tachosu. It repeats, not only b'michsat, it repeats the word tachosu. You make a count. Hakatub. Shana alav da'akev. It repeats the word to say that it's indispensable. And if you slaughter it for people that are not registered, then it's pasul. V'itkash ochlin limnuyav. And the pasuk puts them back to back. Tachosu and also ish lafi ochlo. Which means that just like if you're not registered, that makes it pasul. So too, if you can't eat it because you're tameh, also it should make it pasul. And therefore, it should be pasul. And how can the elders of the south say that if someone who's tameh lamet and b'di'avad, if they bring korban pesach, it's okay, it should be pasul? And the answer is iknei darom la makshi. No, they don't hold of that juxtaposition. They don't think it's significant that ish lafi ochlo is next to that you should count the people. So therefore, they don't learn one from the other. Okay, even if you don't have that hekesh, still we have a challenge against them. Well, look, we'll apply this kal vachomer. If in a place where the owners are tameh lasheretz, and that means they're allowed to send their korban lechetechila, it's okay. They send it during the day, and they'll be tahor by nighttime and be able to eat it. And yet, a kohen who has the same type of tumat sheretz, he cannot make a korban and it'll be pasul. Then makom shenitbu ba'alim bemet she'en mishalachin korbaноtem lechetechila, kohen shenitma bemet en odin she'eno meraseh. In a situation where the owners are tameh lamet, where lechetechila they can. Now, even if you say, okay, b'di'avad they can send it, but lechetechila they cannot send it, and so they're worse off than the previous case, because in the ship tameh lasheres they can send it lechetechila. So here the owners are lower down. Then all the more so a kohen who is tameh lamet should not make it acceptable if they perform one of the services. Then it should be pasul. This is a modified version of the kal vachomer from before, and therefore this goes against one of the chidushim that the elders of the south said, that the owner, that the kohen who is tameh lamet, b'diavad, it's still okay. According to this kal vachomer, no, even b'diavad, it would not be good. And so that is challenge number 1 against Ziknei Darom. And then we have another challenge from a Mishnah Masechet Pesachim that reads, Me'etibeh, mipnei she'amru, nazir ve'oseh pesach, hasis meraseh al tumat dam, ve'nasis meraseh al tumat haguf. The Mishnah teaches that a nazir who's bringing his korban, or someone bringing a korban pesach, if there's a problem of tum'ah, then the seats that the Kohen Gadol wears will clear away that problem. And if there's a problem of tumat dam, impurity with the blood that's being sprinkled, the korban is still valid. But the seats will not help if it's tumat haguf, which right now we're going to assume is referring to tumah of the owner who is bringing the sacrifice, the nazir, or the owner of the pesach. And so therefore, let's see what kind of tumah we're talking about. B'mai ilema b'tumah sheres ha'amas shochatin v'zurkin al tumah sheres. In what way is the owner tameh? Is it tumah sheretz? But you already said, the elders of the south, that someone who is tameh sheretz, an owner, can bring it, an animal, and the Kohanim will do shechita for him and do zirika for him. So it can't be talking about that. Ela tumat met v'katani en asis meraseh alma nitmu be'alim bemet en meshalachin korbanottehem. If it's not talking about tumat sheretz, must be talking about a case where the owner bringing the korban is tameh lamet, and yet it says that the seats will not help him. Therefore, if the owners are tameh, then they cannot send a korban, and if they try to send it, it will not fulfill their responsibility. That's another challenge against the elders of the south, who said that b'di'avad, if they send it, it's still okay. But here it's clear from this Mishnah that's not so. No, in fact, even according to this Mishnah, it makes sense that if the owners became tameh lamet, it's also okay. So what does it mean when it says seats and the seats merasel tumat haguf? Hacha b'maiskinan kegon shenitma kohen b'sheretz. Not referring to tumat haguf of the owner, but rather of the kohen who is performing the service. And so we're talking about a kohen who became tameh tumat sheretz. And that's what it's talking about. The seats will not help, and that the elders of the south agree to that the owners, that the kohen, if he's tameh sheretz, it's no good even b'di'avad. If so, let's look at the continuation of that Mishnah that teaches if the owner became tameh by tumat tehom. Tehom is something that was unknown and then became known later. Tehom meaning underground. For example, if there was a corpse underground someplace, and somebody, the owner of this Korban Pesach, went over there, but at that time nobody knew that there was a corpse there. And so he brings his Korban, and afterwards it was found out that there was in fact something there. So it could be any case where it was unknown and then found out that no one knew, and then they figured it out. In that case, the seats will benefit him. And Rabbi Chia taught regarding that Mishnah that this is only true if it's the type of tum'ah is a corpse that was unknown and then became known, so the seats will help out and make that valid. When he says it only applies to corpse impurity, what is it excluding? Is it not excluding unknown tum'ah that became known later regarding a sheretz, that there had been a creepy crawly thing somewhere and the person didn't realize and touched that place, and then they found out later that it was tumat sheretz, and the seats is not going to help that. You see, if the seats is not going to help that is a challenge against the elders of the south, because they think that if someone is tameh lasheretz, the owner is tameh lasheretz, still, if he brings a korban, it's okay b'di'avad. And over here it says that no, even if he didn't know about it and figured it out later, still the seats is not going to atone, so it's no good, not even b'di'avad. And we answer, La le'me'ute tumata tehom ziziba. No, when Rabbi Chia said this, it only applies to met bilbad. In fact, it also applies to tumat tehom of sheretz. And what he's excluding is tumat tehom of ziva. If someone didn't know that there was ziva, brought a korban, and then realized later. For example, someone saw a zav emission one day, and then that means there's only tameh for one day. Good. So the next day, he goes to the mikveh, and he thinks he's okay, and he brings a korban. But it turns out, later in that day, he sees a second emission, which is going to make him a zav gadol. And so that's a case where the seats does not help him. But in fact, if it was tumat sheretz, yes, he would be okay, and that's how the elders can answer that. Kohen hameraseh bekorbanottehem hutera lo tumata tehom, or lo hutera lo tumata tehom, tifshot tumata tehom hutera lo tahacha bekohen kaimina. Wait a second, what about the question that Rami Bar Chama said? He's just an Amorah, so the elders of the south don't have to agree with him, but let's try. Rami Bar Chama asked, Kohen who is effectuating atonement for someone by making their korban, what about him? If he becomes tameh with tumat tehom, is it okay? Is the korban okay? Or is it not okay? Because beforehand we just talked about the owner becoming tameh tumat tehom. So let's see. If we have the interpretation that we just said above, so we should be able to conclude that tumat tehom is okay. We said that the Resha of the Mishnah is talking about a Kohen when it said Haguf. And it said if he becomes Tameh, then it's okay. So we should be able to answer Rami Bar Chama's question. In other words, if you accept the interpretations that we just said of the Mishnah, in accordance with the elders of the south, well, they said that a Kohen who is Tameh, Tumat Met, he is still okay. B'diavad, the korban is still okay. And so since we have the Mishnah that says that, then we should be able to use that Mishnah, since it's talking about a Kohen, to resolve Rami Bar Chama's question and say, yes, in fact, even if you know he's Tameh, and certainly if it was unknown and then became known later, then the korban will be good. So why was Rami Bar Chama even asking that question? It seems that the answer would be simple. So it must be that it disagrees. The Rami Bar Chama vadai pelige. So in fact, the sages of the south will certainly not agree with Rami Bar Chama, but that's okay. They're both Amoraim, so they can disagree with each other. Tashema. Now we're going to bring a proof for the elders of the south and against Rami Bar Chama. From the pasuk, V'nasa Aharon et avon kodashim, says that Aharon, through his seats that he is wearing, will bear the sin of the Kodashim. V'chi eze avon noseh. What is he going to bear? Im avon pigul harekvar ne'emar lo yechasheb. Im avon notar harekvar ne'emar lo yeraseh. Certainly the seats that Aaron wears is not going to atone for a sin of pigul if the Kohen has in mind that he's going to have consumed the korban after the correct time. Pasuk says it will not be credited, so certainly not that. If notar, that it's eaten after the time, then it says lo yeraseh, will not be accepted. Rather, it must be that the seats will allow a case where there is a situation where something that is permitted for a community, and if it's permitted for a community, then generally if an individual does that, it wouldn't be good, but the seats comes and says, no, since it's okay on a communal level, it will be okay also on an individual level. So some kind of tum'ah that fulfills this role. My tum'ah. So what kind of tum'ah fulfills that? If we say tumat sheretz, where do we ever see that tumat sheretz is permitted in Sibur? It's not. Even if the whole Sibur is tameh sheretz, they can still bring Korban Pesach individually. And so therefore, there's no need to have special allowance. So it's just, it remains an individual permission and not a public permission. Ela tumat met velav kegon shenitzmu ba'alim bemet. Rather, it must be tumat met, and therefore, is it not talking about a case where the owner became tameh lamet? And just like if all the owners, the whole community, became tameim lamet, they're permitted to bring their korban. So too, this is a proof that an individual who is tameh lamet, if he brings his korban, then the seats will allow it. Therefore, we have a proof for the elders of the south that if the owner becomes tameh lamet, they can send a korban challenge against Rami bar Chama. Furthermore, still building up the proof, if it's talking about a Nazir who became tameh, no, the pasuk says if he should. A dead person should come upon him, and even if it's not his fault, he became tameh, lamet, in the middle of Nizirut, then he has to become tahor, bring korban, start all over again. So certainly it's not going to help him if he's still tameh lamet. There's no way. He has to go through a whole process, start all over back to the beginning. And so therefore, certainly the cease is not going to help him. Rather, must be talking about someone who makes a korban pesach, and therefore you see that we learn from this an individual who is tameh lamet that brings a korban pesach should be good. So Harami bar Chama, what are you going to say about that? And he can answer le'olam b'sheres v'shem tuma ba'olam. No, in fact, it could be talking about an individual who is tameh tumat sheretz, and even though a community that's tameh tumat sheretz, there's no exemption for them. But what it means, that something that would be for the community, it's not talking specifically about tumat sheretz, but rather general tum'ah. So since there is a general category of tum'ah that's permitted for a community, which is tumat met, therefore there is a case of an individual who is tameh, not tameh lamet, but rather tameh tumat sheretz. And that's the comparison that's making. It's a weaker comparison because it's comparing two different types of tum'ah, but still, that's how Rami bar Chama could answer it. That just like where for a community, tumat met is okay, and they could bring their korbanot, so too for an individual, the seats will help if the individual is tameh tumat sheretz. There's another version of that same discussion, but with a slightly different derivation that they're looking at the exact word, and says like this: Avon HaKodashim in, Avon Makdishin la. The pasuk says that the seats will help to atone for the sin of the sacrifices, that indeed the sacrifices, something wrong with some impurity in the sacrifices, but not an impurity of the sacrificers, makdishin, tuma. Okay, so it's talking about the sacrificers, the owners, and what kind of tuma are we talking about? Is it talking about tumat sheretz? Well, there's no parallel between an individual and a community, because there's no case where a community is permitted to bring a korban because they're tameh tumat sheretz. Therefore, it can't be talking about an individual who's tameh tumat sheretz. Ela lav tumat met, v'avon kodashim in, avon makdishim la. Rather, must be talking about tumat amet, and therefore it's telling us that the avon kodashim, if there's tumat met regarding the sacrifice itself, then that's okay. But if it's the owner that is tameh lamet, they cannot bring their korban. So that will be a proof against the elders of the south, because they think that an individual is tameh met, in fact, can bring it. So the question is flipped around, because we are deriving something slightly different from the wording. So now it's a challenge the other way around against the elders of the south. They think that an individual who's tameh lamet can bring a korban, and here it says not. And the answer here is le'olam tumat sheretz v'shem tuma ba'olam. No, in fact, this baraita is talking about tumat sheretz, and saying if the meat of the sacrifice itself becomes tameh tumat sheretz, then the seats will help that. But not if the people involved are tameh tumat sheretz. That's certainly true for the kohen, because if the kohen is tameh tumat sheretz, it's pasul. And if the owner is tumat sheretz, then you don't need the seats to help out, because it's fine in and of itself. He'll become tahor. If it's korban pesach, he'll become tahor by the nighttime, and he'll be able to eat it. And so we don't even need the seats in that case. And that's what it's talking about, that it will come to include seats. But seats, how is that an example of something that is okay b'tzibur? Oh, we're talking about shem tuma ba'olam. We're talking not specifically that if the community is tameh lasheretz, it's okay. No, but because there is a case of tumah that's permitted in public, which is tumat met, therefore we're going to apply that. We're going to apply a leniency to a form of tumah in private, which is tumah sheretz, although that applies only to the meat of the animal, of the sacrifice, but not to the people involved. The people involved will have two different outcomes. For the kohen, it's not okay, but for the people who bring it, they don't need the seats, and therefore the korban is still valid b'di'avad. We now move on to the next item in the Mishnah, that if a kohen is sitting, then his service is pasul. Yosheb minelan. How do you know that if a kohen is sitting while doing service, the korban becomes pasul? Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Kira, la'amod lesharet, la'amida becharti ve'lo lishiba. Because pasuk says in Devarim, la'amod lesharet, he has to stand up and serve, meaning Hashem chose the kohanim to stand and not to sit. So that's how we know that it's a prohibition to sit. Furthermore, Tinurabanan, la'amod lesharet mitzvah, kishomer ha'omedim, shana ha'alav ha'katub le'akev. From the pasuk, la'amod lesharet, we see it's mitzvah, lechatechila, that they should stand and they shouldn't be sitting. Now, how come it says again a couple of pisukim later? Let's look at the pisukim inside. 18:5 here is, Kibo bachad Adonai lohecha mikol shebatecha, la'amod lesharet b'shem Adonai, hu banav kol hayamim. So here it's talking about the kohanim, that Hashem chose them to serve and stand. That's from stand while they serve. And then it says two pasukim later, V'sheret b'shem Adonai lohav kechol lechav halevim ha'omedim sham lifnei Adonai. So if someone comes and they want to come and serve, so they have to stand up together with their brethren. So here you have another pasuk for standing up, and that teaches that not only is it a mitzvah to do it and a prohibition not to do it, it teaches further that if they sit while they perform an essential service, then the korban, it becomes pasul. Amar le'Rav Rava le'Rav Nachman, mikedi yoshev kezar dameh umachil avoda, ema mazar b'mita af yoshev b'mita alam matanya aval arel onen yoshev enan b'mita ela ba'azhara. Rava asked Rav Nachman a question. Since a kohen who's sitting is the same as a non-kohen who comes and does something, and therefore he makes the avodah totally pasul. Now, why don't we say that just like if a non-kohen would come in and sprinkle blood or something, then he would get mitabide shamayim. So too, a kohen who sits should also get mitabide shamayim. That would make sense. However, Braita says not so. That a kohen who's not circumcised, or he's onen, or he's sitting, does not get the death penalty in the hands of heaven. Rather, it's only a prohibition. Why not? Why not make it mitabide shamayim as if he was a zar? And the answer is mishum tavim b'chusa begadim v'shelo rechus yadayim v'reglayim shenechetu b'hem ke'achad. It's because the Torah says regarding these two laws that if someone does them, they get mitabide shamayim. And that is a kohen who's not wearing the clothing of the kohen properly, or he did not wash his hands and feet. Now, it says it by those two laws. The general rule is when the Torah says something if it says it regarding one law, then we can extrapolate binyan av. Look, it says this guy is chayav mitabide shamayim, so too, all similar laws should be the same. That's if it says it in one, you could say a binyan av to others. But if the Torah says it in two places, why bother saying it in two places? The rule is kol sheneh ketubim habim ke'achad and milamedin. If the Torah says the same thing about two laws, that means it applies only to those two laws and to exclude all others. And that's why we say that someone who's sitting, well, it cannot be mitabide shamayim because we already have two laws that are mitabide shamayim, and therefore it's not going to apply to sitting. That's the answer for that opinion. But there is another opinion. There's an opinion that says that even if sometimes the Torah says it in two places, and still you can learn from two places to the rest. Well, for that opinion, actually is yet another place where the Torah says someone who serves gets mitah, and that's someone who serves drunk. Gets mitah also. And everyone agrees that if Torah says something in three places, then it's going to be limited to those three places, and you will not be able to apply it to other ones. And that's why a kohen who is sitting, although it's prohibited, and he makes a korban pasul, but he does not get mitah bidei shamayim. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.